This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you now reside.
Donald Wick in Orleans, Massachusetts.
Great. All right, we're going to start off with kind of your early pre-military life.
Okay.
How did you end up on Cape Cod?
That's kind of a good question. We were living in Boston at the time, and we had a condo there, and we really liked Boston a lot. But we moved here because my wife, Jane, wanted a garden, and it's kind of hard to have a garden in the city. Mm-hmm. So that's the primary reason why we moved to the Cape. That was back in, we bought the place in 2003 and moved in 2004.
All right. Did you enlist in the Army, or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
And how did you feel when you found out?
Well, back then, because that was during the Korean War, and you didn't have much of a choice because the draft had been in effect for quite a while. Mm-hmm. So I knew when I was in college, there was a number of my classmates that enlisted in the Army to go and fight in Korea. But I waited till I graduated, and then I knew I was going to be drafted. So mm-hmm. A couple months after I was drafted, and then I actually had to go to the recruiting office where they give you a final physical before they ship you off for basic training. And that was in September of 1953.
And so you said about college you knew you were going to be drafted. Is that about how old you were? So
yeah, I was 22 when I was drafted.
Okay. How would you say your parents and loved ones and close family felt when you were about to join the military?
Well, I think there was a lot of concern. There was a lot of concern, in terms because we did have the draft. I mean, most people, you didn't have a choice back then. That was part of the whole conscription process that was in effect. So there was certainly concern. I'm not sure that, I knew they were concerned. Particularly we had a war going on then, and there was a good possibility that I would end up in Korea.
Yeah, pretty inevitable. When you were just about to depart, what were some of your feelings?
Well, I think when we actually, left the recruiting office, and we were all put on a bus to go to Fort Knox. This was in Cleveland, Ohio, and we were all set to go on a bus to Fort Knox, Kentucky. So I think there was a lot of anticipation. I think it was difficult because we didn't know what was going to happen, and so it was. I'm sure I was nervous. I had some anxiety. Let me put it that way. I had certainly anxiety because not knowing what was going to take place.
Mm-hmm. And where were you before Fort Knox, or where did you kind of originate from?
From Cleveland. Cleveland. So that's where I grew up.
Yeah. Okay. How long did it take you to prepare yourself to travel overseas?
Well, actually, I never ended up going overseas, and the reason was I went to Fort Knox for basic training, and then after basic training, they gave you assignment for the next 8 weeks of school, mm-hmm. and most of us that were in the company I was in the basic training company, most of us were college graduates. Mm-hmm. But when they called off the next assignments, it ended up all the college graduates were assigned to advanced infantry training, mm-hmm. Which meant that, yes, we would be shipped to Korea. Mm-hmm. So we finished advanced infantry training, which was much different. I mean, we had maneuvers where there was actually actual gunfire going over our heads as we were crawling along the ground. Mm-hmm. And so we were all ready to ship out to Korea and had our orders for shipping to Korea when the armistice was declared. So they stopped, we were on our way, and they stopped to San Francisco, and they stopped our shipment process. and sent us to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for reassignment. And I spent 2 months there waiting for reassignment. So.
And could you explain what the armistice is?
Pardon?
Could you explain what they declared?
When the armistice was declared was that there was an agreement between North and South Korea to stop the war, and they had the buffer zone between the two countries, which is still in impact, and has military on both sides of that buffer at the present time. So there's certainly been a lot of controversy about that, and recently there was some kind of action on the part of the North Koreans, and which upset the South Koreans. So things are kind of in a more tentative state right now. But that's the way it's been ever since the war was declared over in '54.
And what were kind of some of your feelings when you figured out you weren't going overseas?
Well, I think it was great relief. Yeah, because we were an advanced infantry company, which meant that we would be the ones that would be on the front lines fighting, because that's what we were trained to do.
Mm-hmm. And when you did think that you were going to be going overseas, did you do anything kind of to get yourself mentally prepared for it?
I think I think it helped because a lot of the personnel, we had been together. Most of us had been together for basic training, and I had a couple really good friends of mine from high school and went to college together and so forth. We were also drafted at the same time, so I think that really helped to have that kind of support. I think we talked a lot about it. I think being in a part of a larger group like that, we did a lot of joking around about it, about how we were going to deal with the I won't use the term that was used, but how we were going to deal with fighting and so forth. And I think we did talk about our fears. I mean, certainly there was a lot of fears. A lot of people were being killed back then, or badly wounded.
And was there any negativity kind of towards you going over there, or kind of towards you joining the military? Because, I mean, obviously you couldn't avoid the draft, but what kind of negativity was mostly kind of thrown at you, if there was any?
Well, I certainly didn't notice any negativity towards it. No, not really. I think there was a lot of people that were against it, but it wasn't like with the Vietnam War, where there was much more opposition to the war. That was the first, since the Second World War, that was the first war that we were involved in that was very different. The Second World War was a different war because we were fighting on both the East and the West. We were fighting Germany on one side and the Japanese on the other, so it was a much bigger war. Many more countries were involved in that war. The Korean War, I think because of the fact that we were allies with Korea, and then what happened in terms of the split that had taken place between the North and the South.
All right, we're going to transition more into more questions during your service. Once you became part of the military, how did you make friends with your comrades? If you did.
Well, when I was reassigned to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I was reassigned to the 503 military police company. So I became a military policeman. I had training there, and then I became a military policeman. So we would have duty, different types of duty. I served in a honor guard, so we'd have to get all all dressed up and make sure that all our boots were shined so you could look at them, see your face in the mirror of the boot. And so it was really a different experience for me, and then we did, Fayetteville was the nearest town, and that's where a lot of the soldiers would go and drink and so forth. So there was a lot of, and then we would have traffic patrol when they would do maneuvers. We'd be out there directing traffic and doing things like that. So it wasn't, it wasn't too bad. And we did a lot of, I think did a lot of kidding around. You do a lot of kidding around when you're in the service. A lot of horsing around, and so that's. I think it helped to have a really good friend of mine that were in the same company as well.
What kind of role models did you have, if you think you had any?
Well, I was also assigned to be the company clerk, and which I had to do some clerical kinds of things for the company. And the master sergeant of our company was a real tough guy. Looked like a bulldog, in fact. But in spite of all that toughness, because he was tough, but he was really, on the other hand, as I got to know him, he was also very gentle. And I think he treated everybody. I think that was the big thing. You want somebody that's in that position to treat everybody fairly. And in all the military, whether it's the Navy or Army, the master sergeant or the chief master in the Navy is the one that really has the major responsibility. And of course, he has to answer to whoever is the head of the company, whoever the captain is of the company.
Let's see. When you first arrived at your first station, what were your thoughts and reactions to basically the atmosphere?
Well, it was interesting going to. Fort Bragg is a very large military complex, and it's also where they did all the training for the paratroopers. Had always been the major responsibility for training paratroopers. So there was it was a part of the 82nd Airborne battalion that was stationed there also at Fort Bragg. So it was, I think we had mixed feelings. We had next to us, at the time we didn't know anything very much about them, but in the barracks next to us were the Rangers, and they had different assignments. If you're familiar with the Rangers, and they're like the SEALs, Navy SEALs.
That makes sense. Can you explain if there was ever any thought of quitting?
Well, you didn't have much choice in that. That was kind of a no-brainer. There was no chance of quitting. I mean, if you were to quit, you would have been considered AWOL, and then you would end up finding yourself in the brig.
It wasn't really an option, but was it? Do you think, if given the opportunity, you would have?
Not really. I think I felt, in terms of what I was doing, and I felt secure there. Yep. And I figured, well, I just had 2 years to serve and I'd be out. So I always kind of took the attitude, how can I take advantage of my situation? So, which I did. I ended up, while I was there, I had an opportunity to be assigned. I had some friends at the provost office, which is at the main headquarters. The provost office, of course, had the responsibility of dealing with all the incidents and so forth among the soldiers, and I had a chance, and I got a job as the supply sergeant, which was probably one of the cushiest jobs I had, because I was up on main base, and we had our own headquarters, and there was only about 25 of us that were living together over against 100 or so. And my big job was going around and scrounging, particularly for coffee. So anyway, so sometimes I would use, you'd get to know somebody, and somebody would say to you, do you think we could, you could see if this ticket could be torn up that one of our privates got for disorderly conduct, be drunk off campus? And I said, well, I could check it out. And he said, well, we'll take care of you, so make sure. What do you need? I says, oh, we always love coffee.
What would you say your happiest moment while fighting for your country was?
Well, I think that I think I've realized it more since I've been out of the service. When people find out that you're in the service, and I have this hat that I wear. It's a Navy hat. It's for my granddaughter that's in the Navy, and so I get a lot of comments and say, because thank you for your service. I say, well, this is for my granddaughter, but I did serve in the Army. So I think I've appreciated it a lot more for being in the service and serving my country in that way than maybe at the time. I was still young.
Yeah.
So
you'd say now that kind of seeing how appreciative people are of your service, that kind of really pays it off?
Yes, very much so.
And can you explain maybe what your darkest moment was while fighting for your country?
Well, I think the darkest moment is when we had to ship out for Korea. I think that was the darkest moment, because we knew we were going to be in combat. So I think that was the darkest and the scariest. I think that was the low point of my service, just because it was, using the expression of dark, it was dark in a sense. So I think the only other thing was we did a lot of weekend in the military. I went on weekend tours or weekend assignments to the beaches that were weren't very far from Quantico Marine Base and for Fort Bragg. So we had the responsibility, because you had a problem with disorderly soldiers, both from Fort Bragg and from the Marines. So we worked together with the Marines MPs as well. So sometimes, I think the first time we had to get somebody, he was really drunk. He was a paratrooper, and we had to call the police to help us pull him off to jail. And so we were thinking about, because this is our first assignment, what we'd do bring this guy back. Was he, because he was so unruly. But when we went to pick him up, he was like a little lamb. So we had a very nice ride back to Fort Bragg. But we had to write him up.
So can you explain, was alcohol kind of a issue back then?
Alcohol is a big issue, yeah. And I think it was an outlet for many of us, and I think it was also a way of developing community and friendship and fellowship among soldiers. I mean, that's what you did. You went to the PX and after your duty service during the day, and that's if you weren't on duty that night, then that's what you did. Sat around, drank, and talked. And
while or during your service, how did you keep in touch with your family and friends?
Well, I was pretty good about writing my parents. I did. I kept in touch. I think it was it wasn't difficult, but I did try to really keep in touch with my family. I think that was important. Mm-hmm. And then I would always try to, when I'd get to leave or get a long weekend off, what I would do is go over to I'd hitchhike over to Charlotte, North Carolina, which was on the other side of the state, and then usually catch a plane on an Air Force plane to up to Cleveland, where my family was. So I'd do that, and I also had a girlfriend at the time who lived in New Jersey, and I'd go up and see her for a weekend or a long weekend. Mm-hmm. And but sometimes I ended up hitchhiking all the way from North Carolina up to Cleveland. So
probably say that you saw your family and loved ones pretty frequently then.
Yeah, I would say at least 2 or 3 times during the year. Yeah, right. And we kept in touch. We called each other from time to time, but we most of the time would write. Mm-hmm. And I get lots of care packages, So.
Mm-hmm. And while you were, or during your service, what did you do for entertainment?
Well, we most of the time when we had the weekends off, we'd go to the beach. Yeah. So that was the big thing. We'd spend the weekends on the beach, usually over to Myrtle Beach or Wilmington Beach. Mm-hmm. And even in March, the water's nice and warm there.
So you were pretty close to the beach.
Yes. Yeah. So that was the big entertainment.
And during your service, what would you say was the craziest thing you ever did?
Probably when I got drunk a couple times, and I don't really remember what happened, but people told me so. So anyway, I guess that would have been the craziest thing.
Would you like to explain what they told you, or is that something you'd...
Oh, I don't know. I just would, it just was funny things that I would do and go up along the street and talk to people that I didn't know.
Yeah, I can understand.
And then I had found a girl about my age at the time. I started dating her. She lived right down in one of the communities along the beach, so. Mm-hmm. That was, part of doing on the weekends when I'd get together with her.
All right. And how would you say your service basically came to an end? Was that when they signed the agreement?
Oh, no. I had to serve out the full 2 years.
All right.
So then you were discharged usually close to the date that like I went in September, and I think I was discharged the end of September, first part of October. So you go through the discharge process, and then you had to serve for another 8 years in a reserve unit. Mm. So.
And upon your arrival back home, basically, what were some of the feelings going around between either you or your family or close friends and all that?
Well, I think everybody, my friends, all of my friends really all went in the service except one. Yep. So I think my family was just really happy to have me back home. Mm. And the fact that I didn't have to go to Korea, I didn't have to go to where the fighting was. I think that was the big thing. Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to switch into more post-military questions. So, if offered the opportunity, how would you feel about serving your country again?
Oh, I would do it. Yeah, I would do it. Even though I'm opposed to war, but I also know that we need a military as well. Mm-hmm. One of the things I think that one of the issues that I have is the fact that we have now we have a volunteer army, yeah. And I wish they would have continued the draft, because I think that that's the fairest way. That everybody that reaches a certain age should serve in some capacity.
Mm-hmm. And can you explain kind of why you're anti-war or opposed to it?
Well, I think in looking at wars, it just it doesn't seem to come to any conclusion. It just continues to go on and on. We've seen this in recent history with Iraq and with Afghanistan and just these wars that aren't really, they're wars, but they're not wars, but they don't seem to be winnable.
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of the tragedy of war. And you see all these young men now that are coming home and with these terrible injuries and the number that are getting killed. It's very sad.
Mm-hmm. And kind of tying into that, what are your opinions on our current military issues and enemies such as ISIS?
Well, ISIS now has become the enemy. I don't see ISIS as I think that the biggest problem today is a lot of people want to beat up on the Muslims because they associate ISIS with the Muslims. Well, the Muslim faith is much different than what ISIS is about, because their whole strategy is killing, of destroying. It's just very sad what they continue to do.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Exactly. I was looking for. How would you say your service has affected your life today?
How's it affected my life? Well, I think it was good. It was good for me. I don't think I was ready. Even when I graduated from college, I don't think I was just ready to go out and get a job. I think the experience of the military gave me experience about a greater sense of what life is all about, and meeting many different people from different parts of the country. I never could get over. We had a number in the company from Brooklyn, and I couldn't get over their accent. So we used to kid around a lot about that.
Yeah. So after your service, you became a reverend?
I did.
So can you discuss if the war had any effect on you choosing that profession and kind of that line of work?
Well, I'd worked when I got out of the service. I always thought about it, so I went to seminary for 3 years. And I think I was also motivated because they had the GI Bill. So my way through seminary was pretty much taken care of by the GI Bill, which was a big thing. It helped a lot of people get education.
Oh, we have returned. Okay. So you stated that your granddaughter has joined the Navy, and when she was about to join, did you give her any advice, or can you explain kind of what you talked to her, if you talked to her at all about it?
Yeah, we had different conversations. I think it was, but we had more actually when she got into the military herself. Mm-hmm. And I'd give her advice because of what the military is all about, and you just have to do what they tell you to do and not question it. Yep. So, I said that people will get into trouble that want to question what's going on, but I said don't do that because it's just going to get you into more trouble.
Can you describe if there's been any emotional or mental distress after your service?
No, they're not that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And looking back on your service, can you say that you really served your full potential and did all you could?
Yeah, I really did. I felt really good about my service. I felt really good about what I did. I must have been okay. I was able to get some really good positions in the service, and I got some nice promotions. So, I always tried, when I was in the service, I always tried to do my best, I think, in terms of what I was asked to do.
All right. And so have you stayed in contact with your comrades from your service, or have you kind of lost touch with them?
Well, we stayed in touch for quite a while, but then we lost touch, and now most of them have passed away. So.
All right. And what have you taken part of after your service, just as kind of hobbies?
Well, I do a lot of volunteer work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing. I, work out about 3 times a week, so that I like to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do a lot of, after I got out of the service, I did a lot of sports, but it's just been too difficult as I've gotten older now to really do much in the way of sports. So even though I like sports, I love to watch them. So does that kind of answer the question? Or?
That does.
Yeah.
And I think with that, we're going to conclude our interview. I'll say thank you very much for doing this. It's been a total honor and pleasure to do it with you.
Well, thank you very much you guys did a great job. Give you both A's. Leave